Mason, as long promised, we're recording our first long-form video today. So here is a very poorly drawn rendition of a Tupolev Tu-134 passenger jet. This was a common jet in the Soviet Union for short to mid-range flights, and it could carry a maximum of 84 passengers with around a crew of 10. It had a length of 37 meters, or 121 feet, a wingspan of 29 meters, or 95 feet, had a maximum speed of 950 kilometers per hour, or 590 miles per hour, and had a maximum altitude ceiling of 39,700 feet. Fully loaded, it would be about 103.6 thousand pounds, or 47.6 kilograms. Silly dog. 47,000.6 kilograms. Had a maximum range of 3,200 kilometers, or 1,900 miles. And this is the site of our story today, which is about Aeroflot Flight 6502. A passenger jet taking off from Sverdlovsk, which is now the city of Yekaterinburg, on the south side of the Urals, which, here on the map, everyone, because a lot of my fans are American and don't know geography, the red bit is Russia, yellow bit is Ukraine, little blue bit's the Black Sea, big blue bit's the Caspian Sea, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. So, there's Moscow, Nizhny Novgorod, Kazan on the Volga River, and Volgograd, and there is where our flight starts, Yekaterinburg on the south side of the Urals. They would have a layover in Samara, which was then known as Kubyshev, before proceeding to Grozny down in the Caucasus Mountains. Now, it's important to know that the Soviet Union in 1986 was much like the American comedian Bert Kreischer, marching forward towards its catastrophic and inevitable collapse while drowning itself in vodka and pretending everything was all right. So, on board the flight were about 80 people, but the two main characters of this story were Flight Officer Gennady Zhirnov and the pilot, Alexander Kliyuev. Very little information is available about this flight, so I do not have their ages or their work history or whether or not they were in the Soviet Red Air Force, because the KGB covered this incident up pretty damn quickly. However, when they took off from Yekaterinburg, it was an easy flight, normal day, a long, boring day for these two pilots. However, sadly, this boredom would result in one of the worst air disasters in the Soviet Union's history. While they were approaching the city of Samara, ready for their layover, Gennady Zhirnov challenged Alexander Kliyuev, "I bet you can't land this plane on instruments only with all the curtains closed over the cockpit windows so you have no visual references," which is insane. One version I heard of this might be that they were playing Truth or Dare. However, Kliyuev gave whatever the 1980s equivalent of bet was, and they closed the freaking curtains. Now, as they approached the airport, they were being waved off by the tower, told to go around to abandon their approach. However, Kliyuev and Zhirnov would ignore the low altitude warnings, the speed warnings, everything telling them that this was a bad idea, and it was their last chance to escape. At a height of less than 200 feet, Kliyuev would slam the plane into the ground at over 170 miles per hour, overshooting the runway and flipping the aircraft over onto its back. Of the passengers on board, over 50 would die in the immediate crash, with between another 7 to 11 passing away later in the hospital. Thankfully, of the 14 children on board the flight, all of them would survive. Of the 94 people on board, 70 would die total, 69 in the crash and hospital later on. Of our two perpetrators, Zhirnov supposedly died in an ambulance on the way to the hospital after being pulled off of injured passengers rendering assistance. I have to say that this sounds like the type of fluff Soviet newspapers would put in the reporting of disasters to try and say, hey, this bad thing might have happened, but don't worry, you still live in the workers' paradise and we have heroes and everything's good. That is my personal opinion. I can't confirm it otherwise. Kliyuev would be later charged with multiple counts of manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years in prison. He would only serve 6, And to the best I've been able to find, he was released and just disappeared into the post-Soviet chaos of 1990s Russia. And that's our story. 70 people died because two jagoffs couldn't keep themselves entertained and made one of the dumbest bets of all time. History is weird. Like, comment, follow for more. And I'm probably going to keep up with these sketches because I actually really enjoyed doing this and I found it relaxing. So if you have any pointers, let me know, because worst comes to worst, I get better at this. We'll be back next week, or in 2 weeks, with another random history story.